us in prayer, and then I'll introduce uh, Dr. Sterling, and he can come share with us tonight. Father, thank you for the privilege tonight just to gather together as your people. Father, we are your church when we gather together with the assembly of your people. And so, Father, we thank you tonight for just the privilege of fellowship, but also on this topic of medical security. What can we do? And why would we want to live longer so that we can serve you longer? Father, so I pray tonight that you would give Dr. Sterling wisdom as he shares. I know it's a broad topic, and I know he's condensed it down, but give him wisdom tonight. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Now, I met Dr. Sterling in 2018, probably in August, early September. Shirley and I were going to go to Rio. I had an invitation to teach in their seminary there. And so I was advised I needed to get vaccinations. So I got the jab. Not the COVID jab, just the jab. And I found out something about him, that he did medical missions in that. So, you know, you go in to get a vaccination and you find out a little bit about what the Lord's doing in the doctor's life, as well as him finding out what's in yours. So when we started doing this, Dr. Sterling, I immediately thought of you, that you would be the right person for this. I had a little hard time tracking him down, but I did, obviously. And so we had lunch together, and he's graciously agreed to come. His wife, Betty, is with him tonight. And so we welcome them, and we welcome you tonight. We have some guests with us. He is a doctor with Doc is Here. And so if you look that up online, you can find out about them. They're a unique group. And so if you want to share anything personally about who you are, what your journey's been, how the Lord's working, that is great. But why don't you come tonight and share what you have on your heart? I want to give him a welcome tonight. If the sound is not good, I may split it behind you. If we move those speakers forward a little, it might take some of that ring out. But hello. I love looking around and seeing a lot of people that I've known for a long time. And as patients, I guess it's probably a HIPAA violation to say who you are, and I certainly won't tell any secrets. But anyway, it's fun. I feel like I'm home talking to old friends, so it's great. Medical security. When Harry called me, it was great to hear from him. I honestly didn't remember him at the time, but we reconnected. We had lunch, and he asked if I would come and give his talk. And I thought, this is exciting. This is right up my alley. And then I went home and started thinking about it, and realized I have no idea what to say. It is very broad, and there's a lot to say. So hopefully this will be instructional. It'll be helpful. I think a lot of what people are expecting to hear is only going to be in the last 15 minutes of this, but I wanted this to be purposeful. More than anything, I wanted to bring glory to God and to point our lives at Him. And we're just directed by God to be servants, to be followers of Christ, and to reflect Him in the world we live in. Medical security. So this is a little outline. I guess you can see that okay. I was afraid it was going to be too small. There will be slides. You will not be. Can you hear me okay? There will be slides you might not be able to read. That's okay. I can't read them either, so I'll read them to you. Also, Harry mentioned there's a handout. I basically typed up the outline for this talk, and then I started filling in gaps and putting more information. It turned out to be about 4 or 5 pages, but that's a PDF, and we can send that out to anybody who wants to. And Harry's in charge of that. So, okay, so we're going to talk. I want to talk about, what does God say about health? Does He care about our health? And then I'm going to just say a few words about me. I don't like talking about myself.
That's a lie. I like talking about me, but I will keep it kind of brief, but just a little bit of background where I come from. And then I want to talk about some basic health concepts. Honestly, that's the bulk of this conversation is how to be healthy, how to stay healthy, how to be in optimal health. What does that look like? Um, then I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of pills we take, supplements, over-the-counter medications, prescription medications, and then when the lights go dim, what do we do if we're dependent on medications, dependent on food supplements, etc. A few little notes about being prepared for medical emergencies. And then I have a nice list of resources. It's certainly not exhaustive, but a nice list of things to have in your library in print form. So when things do go dark, you're not just trying to guess how to take care of yourself. So first, a little bit about me. I was born in Oklahoma. I wasn't part of that decision. I would rather have been born in Texas. I was born in Oklahoma because my parents lived there. My folks grew up in Nebraska. My dad worked in a bank for a year after he graduated high school, joined the Navy, spent most of his time, he did 2 deployments on aircraft carriers in the Sea of Japan. And he used to tell a story, and now in hindsight, he's gone. I wish I could ask him the real details about that story and that experience, but he was on the deck of an aircraft carrier. Sun was going down, beautiful sunset. He was praying, and he felt in a very dramatic way God called him to be a pastor. And he was very excited about that until he got home and he told my mother, because my mother had grown up saying she would marry anybody but a preacher. So anyway, he got out of the Navy after the Korean conflict, and they moved to Oklahoma, went to Phillips University in Enid. He got his undergraduate degree and then did seminary work there. While he was in seminary, he was able to work as a student pastor at a small church in southwestern Kansas. And that's how I got to Kansas. Grew up in Kansas and graduated high school in 1973 and left Kansas and left home, which was my main goal. Moved to Texas finally and went to school at McMurray College in Abilene and did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed to go to college. And so the last thing that I was interested in was anything to do with medicine. Now, when I was a junior in high school, I took the Cooter Occupational Interest Survey, and you take this test, and the results come back, and you sit down with the school counselor, and he says, "Well, it looks like you should do this or this or this." And everything on there, almost everything on my top 10 results was healthcare related. And I don't know the correlation, but it said you should be a pediatrician. That was in the top 3, a cardiologist or a psychiatrist. And I don't know those 3 things. If you put those together, you have a family practice doctor. But I just thought it was just an incompetent testing because it didn't relate to me at all. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to going into record producing, recording engineering. But anyway, when I went to college, I paid my own way through. And sorry, I'll try to speed this up. I watched Betty. She does this, which is an abbreviation of this. So that's if you see her doing this. Okay, sorry. At any rate, went to college. It was expensive, a private school. So I moved back to Kansas, went to a junior college, studied mass communication and broadcasting. And here's where it gets interesting. I nearly failed out. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And in fact, I felt like all of the opportunities that were ahead of me when I graduated from high school were just closing in. And my future was getting kind of dark and gloomy. I didn't see the path going anywhere. So I took a job. It's a long, long story, and I'm not going to tell it right now. But I took a job in a small Kansas town, in a small rural county hospital, Greensburg, Kansas. And I, my job was as a janitor's helper in a hospital. I was there 1 year, and that was the most significant year for change in my entire life. I loved being in that small hospital environment. There were two general practice doctors there that I can't say took me under their wing, but they didn't ignore me. They allowed me to come in and watch a few surgeries and, just be part of the process. I graduated from being a janitor's helper to the hospital's first ever orderly. And it just one thing after another. So I went back to college, pre-med. It took a long time to get through. I like to say that I crammed 4 years of college into about 7.5 years. And finally graduated, moved back to Texas because I knew that I wanted to go to medical school by that time. And I needed to be a state resident in Texas. I'm still a legal resident in Kansas. So I moved to Galveston in 1980 and worked in clinical research at UTMB. And that's where I met Betty. Betty was an occupational therapy school there. There's another long story. She can tell that one sometime. But anyway, was accepted eventually into medical school, University of North Texas, Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. Graduated in 1989, did a family medicine residency at John Peter Smith Hospital, the county hospital in Fort Worth. And then we were being recruited by a number of clinics, but Scott and White was recruiting us fairly heavily. And we came down here and visited, and we just knew this is where God intended for us to be. And we moved here in 1992, and we're still here 32 years later. Our kids were raised here, worked for Baylor Scott and White after that merger in 2013 until 2.5 years ago. And I left Scott and White and I worked where Doc is here, formerly called My Doc, but it's the coolest thing in the world. We do direct care. So instead of the patient coming to the office, we don't have an office. We go to you. We go to the home. I've met people in their homes, in their offices, in their horse barns, in their smoke shops, on their patios, in those parking lot. But we go to where the patient is, see it there. So, anyway, if you have any questions on that, I'm probably not going to answer them. All right, so let's get started. We should begin at the beginning. And that would be Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created everything. He created the world, the universe, everything in it. And then in Genesis 1:26, he created us. He made us in his image and for his purpose and for relationship with him. And we were fearfully and wonderfully made. Where's Bob? So Bob mentioned biochemistry last week. And so for your sake, I put this in. You can't read it. It's okay. I can't read it. It's tiny. And if I blew it up, it's out of focus. This is the basic metabolic pathways chart. It shows the basic complexity of the inner workings of our bodies, of our cells, of how we take in nutrients, chemicals, how our body utilizes oxygen, glucose, makes energy for the cells, makes us work. I love Psalm 139, that for you created my innermost parts, you wove me in my mother's womb. And then in verse 14, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. Now, I'll tell you, when I was a first-year medical student studying biochemistry, I wasn't thinking, your works are wonderful. It was too much to memorize. But it's We are incredibly complex and incredibly wonderful organisms, again, made in God's image. The Bible says a lot about our health. There's a very long list. If you do your favorite non-Google search engine search on the Bible and health, there's a lot, Old Testament, New Testament. I'm not going to read all of this, just the highlighted parts, but on this verse, I don't know if it's right to have a favorite verse of the Bible. I have a couple. This is one of them, Proverbs 3:5. Lean not on your own understanding, acknowledge him in all your ways, he'll set your path straight. But a lot of people stop memorizing there. Verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. When we follow God and his commandments and his ways, we're going to be healthier. The Bible, other scripture, the Lord will remove from you all sickness. He will not inflict upon you any harmful diseases of Egypt, which you've known. I will put none of these diseases on you. At the end, in the reference section, there's an old book that was written, I think originally in the 1940s. It's been revised multiple times, called None of These Diseases. And it's a great book about relating God's plan for us and his design and our ability to be healthy. Whatever we eat or drink, whatever we do it for the glory of God. He wants us to be healthy because he loves us. In Exodus 19, he's telling the Jews, if you obey me, fully keep my covenant, out of all the nations, you'll be my treasured possession. The whole earth is mine, but I want you guys. I want my followers to be the treasure of my heart. I think that's pretty cool. So medical security. What is it? How do we achieve it? Gosh, it was less than a year ago. A friend of mine who's an emergency room doctor here in town sent me a text and gave me a link, and he said, you need to go listen to this guy, Ben Edwards. He's a family practice doctor up in Lubbock, has a website, is referenced on here later. He said, this guy sounds just like you. So I didn't know what I sounded like. So I went and looked this guy up, and he describes 4 pillars, and there's a little difference. It turns out these are things that I've said. I think people who have known me a long time have probably heard me talk like this, but 4 pillars of being in optimal health: nutrition, exercise, relaxation, and sleep. Now, his 4 are exercise, nutrition, exercise, hydration, and sleep. So we differ a little bit on that. And I'm going to talk about each of those just for a moment. I'm not going to take too long, but I think this is the most important, because if we want security in our health, if we want medical security, the best option is to stay healthy, to be healthy and stay healthy. So nutrition, there's the chart again. God designed us to work automatically, but we can't do it just on our own. We need a supply of fuel, and we get that fuel in the form of food. And in Genesis 1:29, this is before the fall. In fact, it was 1:26 where he creates man. And now, a few verses later, he says, I'll feed you. He said, I gave you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed in it, they'll be yours for food. This is great news for vegetarians, not so much for meat eaters. But he will supply us what we need to make our body work, to make all of those chemical pathways work correctly, is in the food of the earth. Now, after the fall, in chapter 9, he says, everything that lives and moves about you will be good for you, just as I gave you the green plants back then, but now I give you everything. So if it moves, you can eat it. We've taken it a little too far. I was born in 1955. The 50s was the decade of fast food franchising. I grew up around Wichita, Kansas, home of several of major fast food companies that still exist today, Pizza Hut, White Castle, a couple others that came out of, yes, sir. What? Yes, it is. A good eye, for sure. I remember as a 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, if my mom brought home Swanson TV dinners, it was a big deal. I didn't realize it was a treat. I thought it was a treat. She just didn't want to cook that night for 5 kids. Uh, but all of that is unhealthy. Fast food, processed foods have just, I mean, I know people who only eat processed foods, fast foods. They don't do well. We need to keep in mind, the old saying, food is the best medicine. We eat to sustain life, not to diminish it. And if we eat poorly, we are diminishing our life, our quality of life, and our longevity. It's interesting, in 1900, 1 out of 30 people died of cancer. 100 years later, 1 out of 3 people die of cancer. In fact, I read a couple of weeks ago in an article that 44% of Americans will have a diagnosis of cancer, of some kind of cancer, before they die. Almost half of it. I guess I made that. Okay, so that's nutrition. Exercise, sorry, is worse. 3/4 of us, more than 3/4 of us, don't exercise. Notice I said us. If you don't exercise and you begin to exercise you go from 0 to 90 minutes a week, you will reduce your risk of dying from all causes by 14%. This is a mature crowd, so most of you don't need to be told that we start losing muscle mass. We start losing our lean muscle mass in our 50s, probably before that, but by 60, we start losing about 1% of our lean muscle mass per year. So by the time we're 80, we've lost about 20% of our muscle mass. Now, people who exercise, and especially people who do any kind of weight training, you're going to lose it, but you're going to lose it a lot slower. The benefits of exercise makes you happier. Your mood is better. You feel better. You have less chronic pain. Helps with weight management, energy levels, improves your immune system, helps you relax when you get a chance to relax, helps you sleep better, and the last thing on there, helps promote better sex life. So let's talk for a second about stress, pillar number 3. You can call it a lot of things. You can call it leisure, relaxation, rest, stress management. We live in a stressful world, and we can't stop a lot of the stressors. The real question is, how are we going to deal with it? So are we responding appropriately to the stressors in our life? Quick biology lesson. There's no test, so you don't have to take notes. We have voluntary and involuntary nervous system. Voluntary system, if I want to pick up my water, my brain sends signals to the muscles. I turn, I twist, I don't fall, I pick up my water, I don't drop it, I pour it in my mouth, I don't drool. That's all coordinated. I'm in control of that. That's all voluntary. Involuntary is the stuff that I'm not in control of directly. The breathing, the heartbeat, the blood pressure. So I like to think of it as the involuntary is called the autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, 2 tracks. So I like to think of it parasympathetic, P, peace, sympathetic is stress, S, and that helps me remember. So parasympathetic nervous system, this will make a point in a moment. Parasympathetic nervous system, I'm sitting, I'm lying in a hammock, outside the cabin in the mountains. It's beautiful, it's peaceful. I just had a good meal. It's digesting, my blood pressure is low, my heart rate's low, and my immune system's gearing up and everything's working great. That's parasympathetic. I'm at peace. The mama grizzly comes out of the woods, thinks I've molested her cubs. She can't find them, or she's hungry. And all of a sudden, I'm operating in stress mode. My sympathetic nervous system kicks in, my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up, I'm breathing fast, the digestive processes stop. Hopefully, I keep control of my bladder, and all my muscles being shunted to my brain and my muscles to either stand up and fight or get out of harm's way. So we are created with a fight or flight, a way to deal with stress. The problem is, there's an old book, I wasn't going to mention this, but there was an old book from, 30 years ago called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I think I was told by a vet friend that zebras actually can get ulcers, but it's a book about this principle and how we as humans need to learn to stay out of fight or flight mode as much as possible. We need to learn to deal with that. What does scripture say about stress? A lot. So page 5 of the PDF handout that is available, I started off with 100 verses from the Bible about stress and anxiety. And I had it there, so I just printed it, and you can have it if you want it. You're familiar with a lot of these. Don't be anxious about anything. Cast all your anxieties on him. Let not your heart be troubled, but let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. For God gave us a spirit of fear, but not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And Psalm 55, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. So God says, very commonly, stand still. Moses gets the people out of Egypt. He's been fighting for this for a long time. Now they have the Red Sea, and God says, hey, we have to do something. And God says, sit still, be quiet, watch, and know that I'm God. God loves to fight our battles. We don't have to fight them all. We need to learn how to deal with the battles that we encounter in life and stay in parasympathetic mode, relaxed. We're going to be a lot healthier. We'll live a lot longer. Finally, sleep, one of my favorite things to talk about. For years, I thought it was wrong that when they said we need 8 hours of sleep at night, we actually need 8 to 10 hours of sleep at night. I was just wrong about that. So the question is, why do we need it? How do we get it? It's essential. Again, a long list. I kept it short. It's good for our physical health. It's good for our brain health, for memory consolidation. We learn better when we get more sleep. It's good for emotional regulation, and it helps improve our immune system, among other things. This is a great book. It's listed in the resources at the end. Matthew Walker is a lead researcher in sleep at Stanford. He's been around a long time. He was at MIT before that, and UK before that. Very popular. He's a great writer, a great speaker. He's not a believer. He's very much the evolutionist. And I wonder if we've been around for 40 billion years, why we still need sleep. You think we would have evolved out of that? We could get a lot more done. But it's there. It's an entertaining book. I think if you like to read like this, if you want the quick and dirty, you can search 12-step sleep. I don't think I did write that on the notes, but 12-step sleep. Harvard was the first place that I know of about 20 years ago to come up with 12 easy steps to help you. Anybody in here have any trouble sleeping? A few subtle hands. So we need 8 to 10 hours of sleep at night. Ideal sleeping temperature, and this has caused a lot of marital problems, 65 degrees. No screen time, that's TVs, iPads, phones, television, anything, for 3 hours before we go to sleep. We need to exercise, but not for 2 to 3 hours before we go to bed. And we need to have a consistent sleep time and awake time. Lots of information about sleep. We just need it. So 4 columns. I spent 15 20 minutes on that. But I think it's important because number one in how to have health security, medical security, is to be healthy, not be dependent on doctors or other healthcare providers, on medications. We're going to do best when we take good care of our bodies the way they were designed. So I want to talk a little bit about supplements, medications, that chart again. So if when things go dark in an apocalyptic state, supply chains for everything, medications, food, everything will go down. So I get asked very frequently about supplements. My favorite story, true story, is a woman, this is probably 18 or 20 years ago. Every time I would see her, she would tell me about some new supplement, and she was actually having a lot of health issues. And so she didn't know what she was taking. So I asked her to, next time you come in, let's do some lab work and have you come back in a couple of weeks and bring all of your supplements so we can go through those. She came in with 3 big bags of supplements. I lined them up on the exam table, filled the entire exam table, filled my desk, stood up and filled the seat of my chair with all these supplements, and we went through them one by one. And she didn't even know what she was taking. Every time somebody was on Dr. Oz and recommended something, she would buy it. We're told over and over, these things are all good for you. So just think about the word supplements. What are we supplementing? We're supplementing what we're not getting from whole food. So a couple of thoughts about it. It's a big industry. We don't need to take 40 or 50 supplements. We just need to eat healthy. If the food chain starts getting short or comes to a halt, what are we going to do to supplement what we've stashed away in the closet for hopefully 3 to 6 months or whatever? I'm just going to, my go-to supplement is a product called Juice Plus. This is not a sales pitch. I've been on Juice Plus since 1997. It is a whole food, plant-based supplement, 17 vine-ripened fruits and vegetables that are cold processed, desiccated, dried out, and powdered form, put in a capsule, and you take them every day with water. Now, full disclosure, when my kids were early teenage years, Betty and I wanted to get first our son and then our daughter on Juice Plus, and we did that. And the cheapest way to do that was it was then a multi-level marketing company. Betty became a distributor, still involved with the company, but it's not really a multi-level thing anymore. Oh, it's okay, sorry. So try to forget that. This is not a sales pitch. This is a product that I believe in. It's well studied. There are, several dozen peer-reviewed articles. MD Anderson has looked at this product with outcomes for ovarian cancer. Vanderbilt has done a series of studies with cardiovascular disease, with pregnancy outcomes. So it's a good product, and it gives you food-based nutrients that are bioavailable that I'm not going to get from canned soup. Okay. Now, there are other products like that. Garden of Life is one. I don't know much about it. I know a lot of Hollywood people use it. I know that a lot of athletes use Garden of Life. I'm told it's pretty expensive, and it's just a green plant-based powder that you mix up. If you look, everybody, I'm sure, if you have ever turned on your television or radio, you've heard advertisements about balance of nature. If you look at their bottles, they look just like Juice Plus. Everything about it looks like Juice Plus. It's 50% more in cost, and I think there are other things about it that are negatives, but the main thing is it's 50% more in cost. The deal breaker for me is it's owned by the Church of Scientology, and so that alone is a deal breaker for me. Take-home message is we need to supplement what we're not getting from our food. And we should have a supply of that on hand. Now, there's a short list of supplements on here. I'm not going to read them off and talk about them. We can ask questions if you want later. But when you look at all of the people online, especially if you look at prepper type of websites and the supplements that people, even Peter McCullough, who I just think the world of, his products, if you look at the ingredients, they have berberine, they have quercetin, a lot of the same stuff. And it's a lot cheaper to buy these individually at HEB or on Amazon right now than it is to buy the products. I mean, support him if you want to. I like him, but if you look at these, Chuck Norris down the road has a company that he sells products sort of geared for preppers. And again, I look at the labels of those, it's the same ingredients, it's the same stuff. So there's a reason for all of these. There's a little more detail, I think, on the handout, but you can do your own deep dive. And I think keeping the number of supplements down to something reasonable, you don't need a whole table full of them, would be fine. So there's nothing on this list of over-the-counter medications that you probably don't have in your medicine cabinet at home right now. Anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil, ibuprofen, which is Advil or Motrin, Aleve, which is naproxen sodium, and then aspirin is a good anti-inflammatory. Tylenol for pain or fever, having a good hydrocortisone cream for poison ivy or any type of skin rash, itchy rash. GI things, you know, if the infrastructure becomes compromised, we're going to see a lot of intestinal infections and diseases. So you want to have things for that. In a moment, we're going to talk about antibiotics. But you're going to want to treat symptoms too. So having a box of Imodium on hand, I don't like Imodium personally. I think if I have a diarrheal illness, I need to let my body flush that out. But in case of emergency, so I've done travel medicine, that's how I met Harry. With travel medicine, I tell people, take it with you, don't take it unless it's an emergency. And I would define emergency as you've been on your hunting trip or your mission trip or whatever, you've been visiting India or Africa, and you get on the plane to come home, and 2 hours into the flight, all of a sudden you're cramping, you start having diarrhea. That's an emergency, take your Imodium. But it can create some problems, you know, constipation otherwise. But Pepto-Bismol is another good one to have on hand. Hold that question. I'll address it if I don't fully ask. All right, so I think this is what everybody's most interested in. Prescription medication. So we live healthy, we exercise, we eat perfect, we don't stress about anything, we get 9 hours of sleep at night, we wake up refreshed, we're as healthy as we can be, but our blood sugar is still a little high, blood pressure is a little high. We have 60 days of medication in the medicine cabinet and the supply chain dries up. We are experiencing historic levels of medication shortages now. Common medications, you know, started with this drug and then that drug, and the attention deficit disorder drugs, the psychostimulants, you still can't get those on a regular basis. But now we're seeing shortages on old, common, cheap drugs that are very effective. A lot of reasons, some of them I understand, some I don't. At the very top of this list, kind of small, sorry if you can't read that, this is all reprinted on the handout. It's a list of antibiotics. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. The second one is ivermectin. I get a lot of questions about ivermectin. Ivermectin's been around for a long time. It's a great drug, and I thought of you, Russell, a lot while I was doing this. We've never talked about ivermectin in the beef industry, but I'd be curious for any insight you have. But it's a great drug. I have used a lot of ivermectin because I've done a number of third world medical mission trips in places where you see a lot of intestinal parasites. In the US, it was rare to prescribe ivermectin. It really became famous, even though it's been out for 50 years. It became famous during COVID, when in the first few days of COVID, there were people. Who was the guy in New York who died of cancer a couple of years ago? The Jewish, Orthodox Jewish guy. Anyway, he was one of the first people who said, ivermectin, the studies are out there. It is effective at preventing or slowing down the coronavirus. And COVID is a coronavirus. 3 or 4 weeks after COVID really hit the US and everything started shutting down and people were talking about ivermectin, the government started saying, through the mouth of Anthony Fauci, and I don't want to get political here, but it's going to be hard to talk to, but he said, don't take ivermectin, it'll kill you. It'll cause liver failure, kidney failure, you'll turn into a cow, you'll start grazing, don't take it. But it's a good drug, and it's still very effective, and if I see somebody with COVID in the first 48 hours of COVID, I will prescribe ivermectin. Now, good luck if you go to your doctor and say, I'd like to get a prescription for ivermectin. That's just not going to happen. They won't do it. Even if they do, you're going to have a hard time finding a pharmacy that will dispense it. And I think I'll finish that thought in a few minutes. So I'm going to go through this list. I'm going to mention just briefly. Again, everything is on the handout. So if there are questions, you can ask me. You can email me later if you have questions. But I'm going to run through this real quick. So things to have on hand. If you could just go to your doctor and say, I want this list of drugs, I would get something, an antiemetic, something for nausea, vomiting. Ondansetron, also known as Zofran, I would keep a few of those on hand. I'm not going necessarily down the order, but so Phenergan is old, it's been around a long time, it's very effective for nausea, vomiting, but it causes a lot of sedation and dry mouth. Having an EpiPen, most people aren't ever going to need an EpiPen, but it's not a bad thing to have in case of any kind of reaction that could compromise your respiratory system. To have one, they outdate usually within a year of their prescription, but honestly, they're good for a long time. We have a couple of EpiPens at home that are several years old, and if somebody was having an anaphylactic reaction, I would get the old one first and give that shot. It would probably work fine. If it didn't, then I'd find something a little newer. But they degrade slowly, gradually over time, but they don't really outdate. Tamiflu. I would much rather have Tamiflu in my bathroom medicine cabinet and take it if I got symptoms of the flu. If you've ever had the flu, you know the symptoms are not subtle. You feel fine, and 2 hours later, your head hurts, your body hurts, you run a fever, you're sore, you have a sore throat, you just want to curl up. So if you start Tamiflu within the first 6 to 12 hours of flu onset, you can usually knock it out within 48 to 72 hours. If you wait 24 hours, you'll shorten the flu by a couple of days and won't be quite as intense. If you wait 48 hours after onset of symptoms, it's not going to do you any good. So having it on hand, hopefully you never get the flu, you don't need it, but it's a good one to have, especially if you can't get it otherwise. Prednisone is a steroid. It's been around a long time. It's good for a lot of things. As I'll mention about antibiotics in a moment, prednisone is one of these drugs that is your friend. It can save your life, but it's also your enemy. It can cause a lot of damage, so you need to know how to use it. At the very end, I put anti-malarials. Now, hydroxychloroquine is not a good anti-malarial anymore because of resistance. It's been used so much. You go to Africa, people just, if they get malaria, they'll just take 3 or 4 doses, they feel better, and then they're done. They haven't eradicated the infection, so the malaria keeps getting spread, and now it's resistant to hydroxychloroquine. It's good for a lot of other things. Most of the hydroxychloroquine, all of the hydroxychloroquine that I've prescribed over the years pre-COVID was for rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, and different autoimmune inflammatory diseases. That works too, but not for malaria. So Malarone, I wrote that on there. Malarone, if you're going to Nigeria or Tanzania, I would give you a prescription for Malarone. It's two drugs in one pill. It's much more effective, and there's not nearly the amount of resistance to that as there is other. So I put the question mark on there because we don't see malaria in this country. A couple of years ago, I read a report. I wish I had saved it, but there was some new strain of malaria that was in Mexico approaching the river, and it's different. I assume Malarone would be effective for that. Are we going to see malaria in this country in the next 10 years? I don't know. That was sort of a prediction with, 8 million people crossing the border, bringing the mosquitoes with them. Yeah, it's likely. So. Yeah, can't read it. It's small print. I just sat down at the beginning of preparation for this talk and just sort of brainstorm what are things that I would want, that I can anticipate needing in an event of the world falling apart. And starts off simple enough: water filters, water barrels. We have okay, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but right before 2000, Y2K, we bought a British Brookfield Big Berkey water filter. Still have it. We used it when the big snowstorm, the ice storm a couple of years ago. We never lost our power, but we lost our water for 3 days. So what you will never hear somebody in this part of Texas say any other time is, I had to go and get snow off the roof and melt it and run it through our big Berkey water filter to have potable water, but it works. My sister lives in Oklahoma and said, we were talking the other night, and she said that Oklahoma City, or maybe the state of Oklahoma, they have laws about how you can use rain runoff. Anybody heard of that? So if you have a water barrel, that water is not yours, even though it fell on your roof. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what my sister said. And yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I thought that was fascinating and scary. Tweezers, super glue. Since I am doing direct medicine, I do carry suture material, but a lot of times I'll see somebody for a laceration, and really we just need to clean it up, close those edges, and put super glue on it. I have a wood shop. I cut myself a little too frequently, and I use a lot of super glue for that. So super glue is super glue is developed for treating battlefield cuts in Vietnam. So it's good for skin repair. Various kinds of band-aids, bandages, steri strips, gauze. Having saline, you can just get a couple big bottles of saline for like contact solution, just pure saline for irrigating wounds. Wasn't going to let myself get into all the little details of how to treat various things, but there are studies that show that tap water is better. You have fewer infections irrigating wounds with tap water than saline, sterile saline. It's not that tap water is better, it's that people will irrigate longer. So it's important to know that you need to irrigate a wound for a long time. With sterile solution, they just kind of rinse it out and don't do an effective job of getting it all flushed out. Latex gloves, petroleum, a big jar of petroleum jelly. You can read the list, and it's kind of a nice little box to have tucked away in a closet somewhere in case it's needed. So these are the resources. Dr. Ben Edwards, he's the guy. He has really nice 35, 40-minute videos on those 4 pillars. Outlive is a book that is really along those same lines by Dr. Peter Attia. Some people are familiar with him. He just talks about health and wellness and smart ways to be optimally healthy. Mark Buchanan, great writer, wrote a book called The Rest of God, not The Rest of God, but The Rest of God, about just learning to rest and let God be God. Very well written. How am I doing? Okay. The glucose revolution, if you go on Amazon and search glucose revolution, there are a lot of books with that title, and they're not all the same. People that have known me for 25 years know that 25, 30 years ago, I recommended a book called The New Glucose Revolution. This is not the same book. This girl, Jessica Inchausti, I don't know anything about her, but I know that I like things simple. So when she came out with the summary of the book, that's what I wanted, $8.25. And if you really are lazy, you can just go to the back of the book and she has a couple pages of what she calls hacks. If you just do these certain things, you're going to metabolize glucose a lot more effectively and more efficiently. So anybody that has diabetes and can't get their medication, the way you control it is exercise, managing your diet. The more you know about how to eat. For example, if you go to Gringos, and when they bring out the chips and salsa, you say, would you please bring the broccoli first and eat a few bites of broccoli. You're going to metabolize the glucose when you do get your chips and salsa. So the two books in the middle, the Survival Medicine Handbook is written by an ER doctor and his wife, who I think is a physician assistant. And it's really a good book on wilderness medicine. If you're stuck in the wilderness and there's a medical emergency, what do you do about it? The book underneath it is Where There Is No Doctor, came out 50 years ago or so. It's been revised multiple times. Now there is Where There Is No Doctor in Africa. In fact, I think there are 6 or 7 different versions of that, Where There Is No Doctor in Africa / Nigeria or Ghana or specific parts of Africa. This book was written for missionaries. Primarily, you're going into very remote places where there is no doctor, no medical resources. So how do you deliver babies and deal with all the things that might come up? You would think you would never need a book like that in this country, but we don't know what's happening. I mentioned the physician's desk reference. I don't get it. It's a big book. I saw a used one, 5 years old, on Amazon for $90. Best books, I think, because if you're going to have prescription medications that you don't use routinely, you need to know how to use them. You need to know how they work, what they do, how not to use them, what are the pitfalls of using them too much or too little. The PDR, physician's desk reference, is just not the book. It's every drug, over the counter and prescription, and basically the package insert that comes with it. And if you read those package inserts, I would advise you don't. Those are written by lawyers, for lawyers, not for people like you and me. But there's a pill guide for nurses that's really comprehensive, a lot cheaper, and a lot easier to understand. Several things on Amazon that just explain almost all common drugs. So here's what we do. Betty and I talk about, these things like, we strive to be physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy to the best of our ability. We do have a supply of food. We're kind of building that over time. We have a stockpile of supplements, Juice Plus a few of the others that are on the list, so that if things really go south, then we can sustain that level of nourishment for a while. What's the end point? I don't know. several years ago, some friends and I were all talking about getting a generator, and it was after the big ice storm. And the three of us, and we all ended up getting three very different things. I bought a big battery pack that has solar and wind uh, capability, and it's an old-fashioned lead battery system, but it'll run a small refrigerator and freezer and a couple of lights. And as long as the wind blows or the sun shines, I've got a little bit of power. Having something like that on hand, if you have a CPAP machine or any kind of medical device that requires electricity, you want to make sure you have someone to operate that. I would recommend at least a 6-month supply of prescription medications. If you can get a year's supply, and remember the half-life on these drugs is long. Cipro, which we're going to talk about in a second on the antibiotics, has been around now since 1989, and it expires, and you can take that to a lab and get it reassayed, and they'll give it another 15 years of life. It's a very stable compound, and that's true of most drugs. There are some drugs that, like tetracycline, you don't want to use that if it's outdated, but most drugs are going to last a long time on the shelf. So I would encourage you to do your investigation now, understand how to be optimally healthy. There are tons of websites, tons of books to help guide you in preparing for, any kind of devastating end of life as we know it kind of scenarios. Get several months of prescription medications. Bill had asked me last week about JASE, J-A-S-E, JASE.com. And so I went and looked at their website, and they have a list of, I think it's 7 or 8 antibiotics. And that pack is $275. But if you go to the pharmacy, for example, if you can get your doctor to write the prescriptions, and you bought each one of those using GoodRx, for example, the whole batch would cost you about 75 or 80 bucks. So if you want to pay somebody $275 to do it, Peter McCullough has a website called the Wellness Company. They do a lot of supplements, and he also has an antibiotic package, and it's 300. Yeah, but it has azithromycin. It does not have Cipro, metronidazole. It has a lot of the same ones that I have listed on the previous page. Roadhouse Provisions is Chuck Norris's. There's no shortage of these places, but just keep in mind they all charge a lot, and they say a year's supply, and I'm not sure what they mean by that, because like with antibiotics, you don't take those all the time. In fact, hopefully you never need to take them. So before I give my final summary, my summary of the summary, I said I would talk about antibiotics, and on the handout, there's a long paragraph. I did not write it. It's totally bootlegged. I cut and pasted it from somebody. I don't remember who should get the credit for it, but not me. But it's just how to approach using antibiotics. Antibiotics are specific, one antibiotic doesn't kill the bugs that cause some disease. A good example, Jim Henson, the Muppet guy, 1989. Ciprofloxacin had just come out. It was called gorillacillin. Everybody was real excited because this thing would kill anything. There was no resistance anywhere. So Jim Henson, the Muppet guy, gets pneumonia. He goes to the emergency room. They admit him to the ICU. He's really sick, and they say, "Hey, this is Jim Henson, the Muppet guy, and let's give him this new stuff, this Cipro." And they gave him some, and it didn't do anything. And so they gave him more and more, and he ended up dying. If they had given him a shot of penicillin, I don't know if this is true. I mean, maybe he was already septic, too far gone. I don't know, but penicillin was the drug he needed. So you can have a really strong drug, whatever that means, and it still is not going to help cure the problem that you have. So if you go back to the chart, to the page, at the very top, the one thing you can read at the very top, I should have mentioned this reference guide. There are a lot of, first aid reference guides uh, to know what you're doing and understanding the antibiotics, what they treat, what they don't treat, how long to use them. If you have a urinary tract infection, 3 days of an antibiotic is enough or more than enough. If you have strep, you need to take the entire 10 days. It's really critical so you don't end up with complications. Okay, so the final summary, and then I'm open for questions. To have medical security, know God and His Word, have a relationship with Him, be actively in prayer, seeking His plan, praying for discernment, love Him with all your heart, your mind, your body, and your soul, and make that your desire, and then be resourceful and be discerning about the times, about the situation, about what our government's doing, what world governments are doing. It's not just America that's falling apart. It's all over the world. So I'm done, except for answering questions.
I have something to say in regard to our event. There may be some other news here that I can add to. So I read an article in Wall Street Journal that in early stages is very effective against COVID. And now around here, I got questions coming on my president and about using ivermectin. And I learned about two drugs. One is horse medication, ivermectin. A lot of times it'll have a bottle-side in it, and I don't know the toxicity of the bottle-side. The cattle ivermectin, a lot of times will have a fluke side. We have a lot of flukes, so they combine the two drugs together. And but you can't buy as a beach store just straight ivermectin.
Yes, 1%. Yeah.
cc for 100 pounds or I don't know about the injection.
Yeah.
We used to like to get it all over, but I just don't know about it.
Yeah, when I have this conversation with patients, I tell them go to the feed store, buy the 1% ivermectin, and I tell them always be sure it doesn't have anything that's just 1% ivermectin. Yeah, because the anti-fluke medicines do have some liver toxicity.
My son just finished a study on breast cancer. People that work in that have a significantly higher incidence of breast cancer. I think it's probably true for all cancers because the circadian rhythm. It's your at night when you sleep, your body repairs.
Yeah. Did everybody hear that? The last thing he said was, what's your name? Dr. Porter. Dr. Porter said that people who work at night, it's been shown they have higher incidences of cancer, and it's probably because our immune system isn't restoring normally because of the lack of sleep architecture. But then before that, he was talking about ivermectin. To be sure, if you get ivermectin, that it's just pure ivermectin and doesn't have any other anti-flu medicines or anything. It's just 1%. And that's the liquid. A lot of people like to use the paste. I've never used the paste. I just buy the injectable, and it's, as you said, it's 1 milliliter per 100 pounds of body weight. And I put that in juice. And how often? I don't know. I've gone months without using it, and I've used it every day for a month. And cold and flu season, when I've seen people with COVID. And it's not just COVID, it's good for a lot of things. And you mentioned cancer, and this is where I thought you were going to go. There are studies with ivermectin and other antiparasitics like albendazole and mebendazole that really are only used for parasites, and we don't see them used much in this country, but there are several cancer protocols that show a lot of effectiveness with ivermectin killing cancer cells or inhibiting their growth anyway.
How do you go in and get penicillin shot?
it's still around and we still use it some, but penicillin orally was 4 times a day. And that's inconvenient. And so over time, they modified that. So the penicillin we use now is typically amoxicillin. It comes in at twice-a-day dosing. But yeah, that's one on everybody's list. If they're selling you antibiotics, then amoxicillin or augmentin, which is amoxicillin plus clavulanic acid. It's a little more potent. Which I used to have in my refrigerator shots of penicillin, but I never used it. It was a drug rep thing that, this is back in the day when they would bring anything and everything. And had this nice little kit with 5 or 6 different drugs in it, but that stuff does outdate. It goes bad. I don't know. I'm looking at you. You may know. I refrigerated 2 years maybe. Amoxicillin is probably 15 years. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Apple form. Yeah, the sulfamethoxazole, trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, which is Bactrim double strength, has been around forever. It's a sulfa-based antibiotic, and that stuff is good. We have some in the drawer that's at least a decade old, but I would trust it. Doxycycline, I mentioned tetracycline, and doxy is more stable, but I wouldn't use doxy that was more than 2 or 3 years past its due date.
So 1 year.
One thing you can be sure of is the expiration dates are probably not, they don't mean anything. They don't mean much. They don't mean much on most drugs. There are exceptions, but
Yeah, recommendation on any one during.
no. Food is the best medicine. Again, good nutrition, those 4 pillars, being as healthy as I can be. Exceptions might be, cold and flu season. I take some supplements every day. I don't take most of the supplements every day except the Juice Plus. When there's a lot of colds and flus and COVID, I will take ivermectin every day. But I don't take anything prophylactically, medication wise. So nobody's asked this. Well, let's get a couple questions. If you don't ask the question I'm thinking of, I'll answer it in a minute. So that's the question. Because if you go to your doctor and say, can I have a year's worth? They're going to say no. And that's the guidelines. I don't know where in the spectrum of law that it's written. If it's the medical board, or I don't know where it comes from, but I can prescribe 3 months worth of medication, and pharmacy won't give you any more than that. And I can give you 3 refills. So that's good for 12 months. I wish we weren't recording all this all of a sudden. Okay, we can just blank me out and you can manipulate the file, right? So if I'm having this conversation with a patient and they say, I really want to have